They call it the dark night of the soul. Have you heard that?
No, never.
So the dark night of the soul is a psychological terminology where the world as you know it and your reality, your belief system, your identity are literally burned to ashes and there's nothing left.
Mm.
And you are left in complete darkness. But one of the things I say to people is it's probably the most hopeful place that you can be, because after the dark night of the soul is true enlightenment. There's only light the other side. And that's why I say, like, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me and the best thing that ever happened to me. And that's why, like, my life started after my death.
Welcome home. Welcome home. My guest today is Hollyanna Vellichor. Holly's stories doesn't begin with success, it begins with loss. She was born into a fourth-generation high-control religious cult, eventually making the unimaginable decision to leave. In doing so, she lost her marriage, her home, her business, her community, her identity, and even her relationship with her daughter. She found herself homeless with her son while living with complex PTSD and fibromyalgia. Most people will call that the end. She calls it the beginning. Today, she teaches what she calls biocoding, an approach centered around nervous system regulation, body awareness, and recovery. Today, we're talking about cults, trauma, chronic pain, identity, resilience, neuroscience, and asking whether our bodies may actually be communicating with us long before our minds understand what's happening. Holly, welcome home, welcome to W.A.R. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being here. So let's begin with this. You often say your story began after your death, not your physical death, the death of a person you thought you were. That's one of the most powerful introductions I've heard. Take me back. Who died?
Well, that's a really good question, and one that I've been probably walking my way through since I left 4 years ago. This question of who was it who died and who is this? And in a funny way, I actually refer to the previous Holly as former Holly, or the old Holly. And interestingly, I talk about her in the third person. Oh, like, oh, she was like this, she was like that. And it sounds strange to other people because it sounds a little bit like I'm divorcing myself from her or dissociating from her in order not to feel the pain. And in some ways, there might be an element of truth in that, temporarily, just so I can get through. But I also do feel her pain. She was a very sensitive soul. She was a loving mother. She was creative and very romantic, very poetic, and really just someone born into the wrong environment, because everything around her was, where she needed gentleness, everything around her was harsh and judgmental and oppressive.
That's deep, because I could hear the pain while you're talking about it. And most people think death means, your heart stops, you stop breathing. Sometimes your identity dies when you're still breathing. And I've experienced moments where the life I built completely collapsed, So you wake up one day and you realize, I don't even know who I am anymore. What was that moment like for you?
Well, when I think back to when I first got out, I was just shell shocked, and I felt like I was dying. I really did. I couldn't engage properly with the world around me. I was like a zombie, just doing what I had to do, the next step in front of me.
Right.
And I hadn't just lost everything. Like you said, I lost, my home, my community, my family, my place of business. I lost my daughter. I haven't seen her since. And I think the pain of that was just too much, and it just broke me. It just broke me. And at that time, I really was I just felt like I was, just a zombie. I think that's the only word I can use to describe it. It's really hard to compare it to anything because there's nothing really to compare it to. And I wasn't just dealing with that loss as well. I'd grown up in a high control religious group that had told me what reality was for the first 40 years of my life. And when I got out, that reality had crumbled. It had fallen down like a pack of cards. And I had to figure out what is it then? Because I knew what it wasn't, but I was in this place. They call it the dark night of the soul. Have you heard that?
No, never.
So the dark night of the soul is a psychological terminology where the world as you know it and your reality, your belief system, your identity are literally burned to ashes and there's nothing left. And you are left in complete darkness. But one of the things I say to people is it's probably the most hopeful place that you can be, because after the dark night of the soul is true enlightenment. There's only light the other side. And that's why I say, like, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me and the best thing that ever happened to me. And that's why, like, my life started after my death.
I feel you deeply when you speak about that. And you just spoke about you being born into a fourth generation high control cult. For people who've never lived inside something like that, help us to understand it. What did a normal day look like? And, what did you believe about the outside world?
In many ways, the religious group I was brought up in, from the outside, looked very benign and they looked very normal, like just another church group who might look a bit weird, and a bit like silly, just from the outside. But from the inside, there was a huge amount of control. So what you wear, what you watch on TV, who your friends are, whether you can do higher education, who you might date, who you might marry. There's just so much that you have to consider. And especially for a woman, like, you have even less of a voice and less of a say in things. So I remember being told, I remember asking a question when I was in part of this study group that I'd been sent to, like, this ministry school to go and learn how to be like a local missionary. And I remember them going through all of their material, and then I was sitting there writing down questions, because I'm one of those really unfortunate people that has a lot of questions, and they're usually the ones people don't want asked. And so I started asking a question, and they said, we'll stop you there. You need to go home and ask your husband. And I said, but he didn't qualify for this school.
Right.
And they said, well, it's not appropriate that you are asking questions here. You need to go home and ask your husband. And I remember sitting there. This was probably in the lead up to me leaving. And I think sitting there and hearing that, I just thought, I was so angry, because I thought, I've got just as much right to think about these things. And how do you expect me to develop a strong faith if I can't ask reasonable questions that help develop my insight?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I've seen that a lot, like on these religious cult documentaries. I mean, that's the only time I've seen anything like that with Jehovah's Witnesses. And
that's the one.
Really?
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
I've been trying to dodge it for a while now. My mother is a Jehovah's Witness. I got a lot of good friends that's trying to get me to come to the Kingdom Hall, but I just see a lot of bad negativity. I seen the documentary on HBO, but that's my view of it just from what I see on TV. But when you're born into it, that's just life, and you don't know you're inside something abnormal, I could imagine. And so when did you start first? Was that the first time you began questioning it?
I always had a problem with it, I think, from a child, because I could see things as they really were, and that can be a blessing and a curse, and it's certainly a curse if you're stuck in that environment. Because I remember being in one of their services, they call them meetings, and the speaker is saying something that I thought was ridiculous, maybe something like how everybody outside should be destroyed or something like that. And I'd be sitting there thinking, oh, that's awful. That's so unloving. That's so unchristlike. And looking around to see, like, is anyone else as shocked as I am? And seeing everyone going, nodding along, like, oh, yes. And I felt like, like when you, like invaders of the body snatchers, and you're trying to blend in. You don't want them to know that what you can see, like in case
Yeah.
they like still like you're there kind of coming towards you, like blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's funny.
Stay back, stay back.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're trying to sort of blend in and keep my head down and not say too much. That I found out later that I'm very neurodiverse. I didn't realize it. I thought I was just, I don't know, I don't know what I thought about myself, but I'd be really quiet, and then all of a sudden I'll just come out with something.
Yeah,
Yeah, but blah 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 blah, and then think,
right.
oh, I've just given myself away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, what I meant was,
Right, right. So it wasn't like leaving wasn't just changing churches or halls. You lost your marriage, your family, friends, business, community, everything.
everything.
You
Yeah.
know, did you know the price before you walked away? What was going to happen?
Yes, one of the reasons why you don't walk away is because you know the price. A lot of people say to me, if you didn't agree with it and you didn't believe it, why did you stay? Why didn't you just leave? And it's because there's a really high price to pay. You're paying the price of your family. And so on the one hand, you can stay and keep your family. And on the other hand, you can be truthful and live unhypocritically and authentically, but you have to pay the price of your family.
Mm.
And in some ways, this is a really difficult question to ponder on, because I'll ask you this: if someone said to you, what's more important, truth or your family? You can only have one. What would you
Hmm.
choose?
Oh my goodness. I would choose family all the time.
Right?
Yeah,
And that's
most
the
definitely.
yeah, and most people would, and most people do, which is why they stay. So
Right.
what happens is you're put in this situation where you're forced to choose. You can either be truthful or you can keep your family. And
That's terrible.
that's the choice you have to make.
That's
And a
terrible.
lot of people, when you look at it that way, a lot of people would judge me extremely negatively, because I haven't shunned my family, but the choice I made meant that I was shunned.
Hmm. Did fear ever almost convince you to stay?
There's a lot of fear growing up in a cult. There's a lot of fear of being in the cult, and there's a lot of fear leaving. So fear is a big part of growing up in that environment, because from a very early age, from a very young child, you are taught that one day Armageddon is coming, and like God's going to send like fiery angels to destroy everyone,
Right.
and they're all going to die. And you're taught that you, as a Jehovah's Witness, you might survive.
Mm.
Not you will. They quote a scripture where it says, probably, like probably you might survive. So even if you're a good Jehovah's Witness and you do everything that you're supposed to do, that's still not a guarantee. And they also like to emphasize persecution. So they have a kind of like, I call it persecution porn, right? Because they kind of almost get off on the idea that they're being persecuted. So if you go to someone's door and you knock on their door and they're rude to you, they're taught to remember the scripture where Christ says, they hated me, so they'll hate you.
Right.
Okay? So then that's proof. Like the persecution is proof of doctrine, and it's the proof that we're right. And so they emphasize a lot of persecution. So if there's anything going on around the world, and goodness knows how much of it is true and how much of it is exaggerated, I'm not sure, but if there's persecution going on, then they will go, oh, look, you see that we're next, so
Yeah,
they'll
yeah.
give you examples of like militant armies storming the kingdom halls, gunning everyone down, taking your children away, raping the women, and you're taught that's going to happen to you, and you're going to have to stand firm. And
Hmm.
for a sensitive child, because I was very gentle, neurodiverse, right? So I'm going to take everything like, oh, that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
I was having constant nightmares that people were after me, and it caused huge amounts of PTSD. And then, then there's the snitching, where you're being watched constantly and they're
Wow.
encouraging each other to snitch. And, you don't have to be doing anything that bad. It could just be something like, I used to be a dancer, and when I started to have therapy for the first time, I began dancing again for myself. And I did some little videos and I put them online, but they're nothing. I didn't promote them or anything. They're just for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone found them and reported me to the elders. And then I was brought into their kind of internal court system to be questioned.
What?
About, brazen conduct. That was my charge.
What's that?
Yeah. It's like ballet dancing.
Yeah.
It wasn't pole dancing or anything. I'm nothing against pole dancing, but it's a great sport. But yeah, it was just like, kind of slightly avant-garde, like, yeah.
I'm glad we're having this conversation because it's giving me a lot to think about. Because I was this close to saying, okay, let me go test it out. Let me go see what it's about. Let me go to the hall. And a good friend of mine, he sends me, he's older, he's an older gentleman. He sends me scriptures every morning,
Okay.
Every morning, like nonstop. It doesn't stop, like I appreciate it. He's thinking about me and everything, but it's just a lot of pressure, And when I tell my mom, the documentary I seen on HBO about it, I'm like, Mom, look at this documentary,
Will she let you talk about it?
No, she shuts me down right there.
Yeah.
She shuts it down right there. She wants me to run my household a certain way like her husband. I'm the man of the house and I'm the head of the family. I should run it like this. I should run it like that, but I'm just not into that, I believe in equality in a relationship, but she says I'm the man of the house. I should run like this. I should run like that. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. It's a lot to think about, but if I question her on it, she'll shut me down. She don't want to hear it. She doesn't want to talk to me. She, everything, it's like if I'm not in that bubble with them, if I'm not planning on being a Jehovah Witness, or if I'm not a Jehovah Witness, they wash their hands of you. They don't want nothing to do with you.
That's true. So they have a very inside-outside mentality. It's not theirs as individuals. I never talk about this as these are the individual people, right? Some people they really love it, and it's a real platform for their narcissism. But some people are just really sincere, and they love God, and they want to follow the Bible, and they want to live a good life, and why not, right? But it's the organization, and the organization is terrified of outside influence, especially now with the internet and how widespread things are.
Right.
So it's very difficult for them to hide now, because before, like going back before the internet, they could kick someone out, say whatever they liked about it, really discredit the person who's gone, and keep things relatively stable on the inside. Now, the information is so accessible that people can find things out themselves. You can look up things like the Australian Royal Commission, and there was something similar in the UK where they were really delving into not just Jehovah's Witnesses but different religions and how they were dealing with abuse in the congregation, whether it was being reported and dealt with effectively. And they found that the witnesses were one of the worst of all of the religious groups. They were the worst.
Wow.
And you can watch their governing body. The governing body are their kind of top leaders. They don't have one cult leader. They have a group of them. And that's one way they get out of saying they're not a cult. We don't have one leader, right?
Right.
We've got this group of them called the governing body who have appointed themselves as what they call the faithful slave. So they use a parable where Jesus talked about a faithful slave serving the master, and they say, that's us. He was talking about us. And you can hear them being interviewed in this it's a public court case, and lying. And they're lying. Like, it's really easy to see that they're lying because people know the doctrine, you understand the doctrine, and they're lying about the doctrine that you know about. So, and they have a terminology for that, which is spiritual warfare, which is where you're allowed to say anything so that that doesn't bring reproach back on the organization. So as long as you're protecting the organization, you can lie your head off, but don't lie to the elders. Then you'll be in trouble. Yeah.
Right. My mother is absolutely not going to watch this interview. She's really not going to. I'm going to tell her, I'm going to point it to her, I'm going to send it to her, and she's not going to watch it.
She won't watch it. they're taught to protect their faith.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of thing is, what they say about people like myself is that I'm a puppet of Satan, that I have a diseased mind, and my sole purpose and intention in life is to destroy their faith and lead them into destruction.
Wow.
And that's really quite a story, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is.
But I'm not, I don't want to, I think, as I said, with the individuals themselves, a lot of them may have something that they find they can have faith and hope and a sense of moral values. I have nothing against religion
Right.
in that way. I just think there's a difference between coercive control and you nourishing yourself with a sense of faith.
Yes, ma'am. So let's change gears for a moment here. You became homeless with your son. That's every parent's nightmare, you know? What goes through your mind when you're trying to protect your child, while you don't even know where you're going to sleep?
The early days when I left were challenging. I remember I had a client who offered us to house sit for him for a month. And so I house sat for him, but I had no idea where we were going to go at the end of the month. And it was getting closer and closer to that time. And I remember I was just sat in this health club where I'd been teaching, and I was sitting down in the cafe, and one of the class members came past, and she said, "Are you all right? You don't look yourself." And I just burst into tears and came out with this whole story. I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't know what I was going to do, where I was going to take him. And the local council had denied us any support. We couldn't get any legal aid, nothing. And she just reached into her handbag and pulled out some keys, and she said, "You're coming home with me." She had a tiny little one-bed apartment not far away, and she said, "You're welcome to stay here until you get yourself on your feet." I slept in her laundry room for 9 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so I was very
something.
grateful, very grateful.
Yes.
But it was very restorative, because growing up inside the cult, I had believed the world was so bad outside, and I just felt so down and so nihilistic by the time that I left, because there was nothing left of my own sense of spirit to keep me going. And I
Right.
suddenly realized there's earth angels out here. There's people who are,
Yes, definitely.
truly loving people. I call them the ferrymen. They just take you from one side to the other, and then they drop you off and bid you
I like
farewell.
that. I like that. So how did you
They're
keep
out
your...
there.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So how did you keep your son emotionally grounded during this time?
So during that time, the way that I dealt with it with my son was to be honest and to say life's difficult sometimes, and we're going through a difficult period, but look how these people are being kind. Isn't that wonderful how they're being kind? And that there'll always be good people out there that if you're looking for them. And I was pretty paralyzed myself with everything I had to do. I had never been exposed to the kind of things I had to do, all these legal forms and all sorting out these different bills and things, because my ex-husband, he had kept a very tight control of all the finances. I wasn't allowed to look at anything. So I just had
Wow.
I felt like a child had been thrust into this adult world and didn't have any sense of what I was
Yeah.
supposed to do. And sometimes I'd be so paralyzed I wouldn't be able to even open my laptop. And I remember the first time I opened my laptop, and I don't know, I filled out this like one page of this form, and I went home and I said to my son, "Mama filled out the page. I did it. I filled out the page. Let's celebrate." We made nachos and watched a movie. And after that one day, I was like, huh. And so I started to do that with everything. So every time I got over a little step, I would, I don't know, make us mocktails, and we'd blow up some balloons or something. Just silly
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah.
Where I would say, look what we did. Like,
Right.
great. We're
I
doing so
love
well,
that.
aren't we? Yeah. And then, some days I would fall to pieces because I just wouldn't know what to do next, and I would cry, and he would see me crying, and I would say, "Yeah, Mama's overwhelmed. But I'm gonna cry now, but then I'll sleep on it, and I'll probably have a new plan tomorrow." And lo and
Right.
behold, I usually did have a new plan the next
Yeah.
day. Actually,
Yeah.
thinking about it's making me quite emotional, because I
Yeah.
haven't thought a lot about that time.
You're such a beautiful soul. I'm sitting here like, wow, you're strong, and one of the things I admire about you is you don't describe yourself as a victim. You describe yourself as curious. I read that. So Where did that mindset come from?
I think I always was like that. I was always a really curious child, and I was always fascinated by the world around me and how things worked and why someone said that or how they were like that. I was curious about people. I was very understanding about people as well. I grew up with a brother who had a very severe conduct disorder and he was extremely violent. But my parents had taught us to try to be understanding and patient with him. I guess partly because so it didn't trigger him into some kind of violence towards us. But we had learned how to navigate him a little bit and be understanding. And that led me to be very curious about people who, in some ways, this is a negative quality I had to be very careful of later, because you're kind of walking into the mouth of a crocodile, like, those are sharp teeth. Look what those,
What?
he's smiling. He seems to be smiling. Oh, the poor croc. Maybe he just needs a hug.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I did get to see a lot of nuance, and that things are not black and white, and that there's a lot of complexity in the world. That someone who acts in a really heinous way can be incredibly funny and creative, and someone who is maybe a little bit dodgy with how they behave can also be really kind to people and really helpful. So I learned nuance, and
Yeah.
that curiosity is probably the main factor that led me to where I am now and
Yeah.
kept me going, I think.
That's interesting. Curiosity is a strange response to suffering, but most people, they become bitter. You became fascinated. I love that. I love that mindset. So before all this, you were a competitive athlete. Then later you developed fibromyalgia and complex
Yep.
PTSD. That's two different, completely different bodies. What did that experience teach you?
They told me to be really patient. Yeah, but coming from being an athlete where I was extremely active, and in many ways I had a lot of control over my body, because I could demand that it did this thing and then train it to do that, and then it would do that, to being sick was initially really frustrating, because at the peak of when I was poorly, I couldn't even walk from one side of the room to the other. I couldn't take the children to the park on my own because I couldn't run around after them. So I'd be like just benched, while they're running around. And I just felt like I was missing out on life. And I thought, I can't stay here. I can't stay here. And I just was so determined that I'm going to get back to health again. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it.
As a veteran, I've learned trauma changes the body, your sleep, your pain, memory changes, confidence, all that, right?
Yeah.
What surprised you most about how trauma physically affected you?
I think looking back, the thing that surprised me is how much I didn't realize I was traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I was a difficult person and that I needed to be a better person. I needed to be less dysfunctional and more helpful and less reactive. Yeah. And I referred myself for counseling at one point. This is the first time I referred myself for counseling, not because I was depressed, not because I wanted to exit, but because I thought I'm such a burden on everyone and I need to stop being that. And when I look at that person now, if I could have spoken to her now, I really, really would like to tell her, no, you've got it wrong. You're in a terrible situation. Like, this is awful. Like,
Yeah.
I was 9 out of 10 on the ACEs score. Do you know what the ACEs score is?
No.
It's the Adverse Childhood Experience score. So
Okay.
there's 10 categories of
Mm-hmm.
adverse childhood experience. And on this study, they found that if you scored 4 or more, it increased your chance of developing a severe illness,
Really?
addiction or early death by around about 400%. I forget the number, so you might need to look that up, but it was really high, right? So I scored 9 out of 10 because I kind of ticked so many boxes of risk, with domestic violence and abuse, and there's just so many things that happen. And I'm surprised in some ways that I'm still here,
Mm-hmm.
because I wouldn't classify myself as someone who's excessively strong, or excessively like robust. I'm gentle and sensitive.
What age, when did you take this test, the ACEs test?
Yeah, it wasn't until much later in life, I think I'd gone for trauma therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So not counseling, I'd actually gone later for trauma therapy. And because I'd been referred, and then I started to look into it a little bit more, and I came across because I'm a researcher. I read everything. While everyone else is out partying, I'd be sat up at night reading medical research papers on the nervous system.
Right.
And making notes or reading books on neuroplasticity. Like that's where my head's been for a
I
long
love
time.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a
Okay.
nerd. I'm a nerd.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I came across it and looked at this study, I was like, well, that's interesting, because I was like, that's I meet that one, and I meet that category, and I meet that one. There was only one on there that I didn't meet. I forget what it is now.
Wow.
But I was like that's all of them really, and I forgot about it after that, because I was still like thinking, oh yeah, like, oh, wasn't it crazy, like that time that our brother rounded us up at gunpoint, like, or like, oh, wasn't it crazy when this happened, like,
What?
normal? Do you know what I mean? Normal.
Yes.
And I remember saying to my trauma therapist something like that. Oh, well, you know when your brother puts a pillow over your face and suffocates you, like, when they do that, and he was like, no. And I was like, yeah, when he does that, or like when he holds you under the water till you can't breathe, like that. And he was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just was like normal for you.
Yeah, normal. But the thing is, just because it's normal doesn't mean that it doesn't affect your nervous system.
Right.
What it means is that is how your nervous system has been shaped since early. So it doesn't mean it hasn't affected you. It means that I can probably hold quite a lot of material that is difficult. And that probably makes me as I am, a very good trauma and somatic therapist, because people can tell me things and I'm able to hear it and listen to it and hold it without crumbling. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you. And I think that's what I didn't realize. And in terms of the fibromyalgia and the PTSD, they're not two things. It's just a collection of symptoms of one thing. We give that two labels, PTSD and fibromyalgia. It's really just the one thing. And what it is the body is completely overloaded, and it's trying to cope with the overload. It's trying to adapt to the situation it's in. The body has one directive, and the one directive is very simple, and it's continue. Right? The body has very simple needs, and it prioritizes energy management within that, because if you think about what we are, and by the way, this is probably my most fundamental question that I ask myself and I ask clients: what are you? Not who are you, what are you? And what you are at the core is a collection of particles. You're being held together by forces and energy, and those particles maintain some persistence. So the idea of James continues. So here you are, you're still here, right? And you don't look like a newborn baby, but the idea of you has continued. And why is that? It's because those particles have been sharing information, and so then we have this persistence of form. But that's hugely energetically expensive. That's very costly. You can understand why humans don't last that long. It's a very unstable state of affairs, because we're not a solid object. We're a dynamic system. We're constantly in flux. You might think of yourself more like the stock market, a collection of different companies that are kind of varying like that. And you're going to be changing moment to moment. If I look at you now and in 5 minutes, the idea of James has changed slightly. So
my head is spinning over here.
Yeah. So when you think about that, think about the energy it takes to have that persist. This is no small thing. This is huge, right? And we take it for granted. We're like, oh yeah, I woke up this morning, right? That's incredible. And because my body has this directive and it's doing it really well, my body's done an amazing job. I know that for a fact because I'm still here, right? So it's done this fantastic job of keeping me here. But part of the way that it kept me here was to shut the system down a bit, because it's using far too much energy on other things. So it has to use that energy on managing the stress, the risk, all of this load that's put upon the body. Plus the fact, what do you do when you're horribly stressed? You don't sleep so well. I had nightmares every night. I barely slept. I probably drank too much because I was trying to cope. I wasn't an alcoholic, but there was probably more alcohol than my body would have liked to have coped with. Probably didn't eat that well. A lot of the time I was underweight because I was so stressed. That's a horrible amount of load. So what's the body going to do? It's going to say, okay, well, I'm having to redirect all this energy here, here, and here. Boom. Shut the system down. Power down. And that's what fibromyalgia is. It's like a stop sign. No, stop.
Yeah, I was reading about it. It's like people are still trying to understand it. And I read, like, most people, I've seen this YouTube video question whether it's even real. But I've heard about this like forever now. Like, why do you question if it's even real? Like, obviously it's a diagnosis. And like, so what was that like living with it? Did anybody ever question like, oh, she's making this up, or you know?
I love it when people say that. When people say it's just this, or I don't think it exists, or it's not real, I go, what do you mean by real? What do you mean just? You know, I want to know what they mean. So usually they can't answer that. And what they're referring to is something to do with the label and what that label is attached to. Or is it, for example, all in your head, right? Now, sometimes doctors will say this, the pain's all in your head. And in many ways that's true, because what it is wiring in the brain. So if you look at acute pain versus chronic pain, so do you know the difference between the two?
Acute pain and chronic pain.
Yeah.
I would know. It sounds like the same thing to me.
Yeah, so acute pain, you crack your shin on the coffee table, right? And boy, does it hurt.
Right.
And then it swells up a little bit. You've got a bruise. You've broken some capillaries. Your body's gonna do things. It's gonna set up a little action plan. So it will send lymph there, and that looks like swelling, right? And the lymphocytes are there to, just in case there's anything, it needs any infection or anything like that, it needs to sort out, pad it out a little bit to protect it. It will start repairing any broken capillaries, clear up any blood that's pooled and break it down, take it away, and it will fire off pain signals. And part of that is to say, careful, be careful, right? Don't go banging it with a hammer now. And once it's repaired, as like the more it repairs, the more the pain comes down. The pain is gone once it's done, right? So there's no more pain in your shin. You can poke it and it doesn't hurt anymore. That's acute pain. So it's pain at the site related to the injury. Now, let's say, for example, you tear a ligament in your shoulder and it's a partial tear. Maybe that takes about 8 weeks to heal. And so you're expecting some soreness to progressively get better across the 8 weeks, maybe 3 months if it's a bit more tricky, right? But 3 years down the line, there's still pain. Is that caused by the injury?
You talking about chronic pain?
That's chronic pain, yeah. So the pain now, is that caused by the injury?
I would think that's caused by something mental.
Yeah. So the pain's no longer at the site of the injury because the injury's repaired.
Right.
And often I get people say to me, clients will say, oh, well, I've got an injury here where I tore a ligament. I go, okay, when did you do that? Oh, 3 years ago. I said, you don't have an injury. You don't have a torn ligament.
So is it all up here?
That will be repaired. Yeah. So what all up here means, or just in your head, or all in your head, is a confusing term because it sounds dismissive. But what it actually is a learned pattern pathway, right? So it's a learned pattern. The sensation is real. The experience is real.
Right.
The cause is not a torn ligament. The cause is something else. So when we're addressing chronic pain, there is no point in addressing the shoulder.
This is very insightful.
And it's the same with, fibromyalgia is a bit more complex because we talk about fibromyalgia in terms of load versus resource. The body's overloaded, it's a big shutdown. That's partial. That's partly true. But the other part of it is to do with how chronic stress affects the signaling in the body over time. So it can actually degenerate the actual architecture of cells. So if you think about how cells are organized and, even down to things like which direction fibers are laid and helical structures within the cell, and the helical structure helps with effective signaling. If that's destroyed or broken in some way, the signaling becomes very glitchy. And so when we get glitchy signaling, you start getting strange, random sensations around the body. So it's a little bit more complex with fibromyalgia than merely that's a learned pathway. That's a more simple chronic pain. And fibromyalgia, we're looking at more of a combination of factors. It can take a little bit longer. I can address chronic pain in the shoulder within a few sessions, and fibromyalgia probably takes a bit longer because you're not just having to rebuild safety within the nervous system and stability within the person and addressing load versus resource. You're also waiting for the actual structure of cells to be repaired.
Amazing. That's amazing.
But by the way, this is wildly underestimated in the medical industry, and they do not address it. They'll throw medication at it for symptoms, but all that is like there'll be different symptoms, and this is similar with other chronic illnesses. You'll have different symptoms, so you'll have one doctor address this symptom, one doctor address this one, this one. And I say it's like branches of the tree. right? And you've got a different doctor addressing a different branch, but all branches lead to the same roots, and nobody's looking at the roots.
Oh, wow. 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 I could just say, wow, that's amazing. That's a lot to take in right there. Because I think I'm suffering from a little bit of fibromyalgia. I'll save that for another time. Let's talk about biocoding.
So biocoding came about partly through my own lived experience, because I always say I'm my own first research project. You know, I was both the scientist and the participant and the result of my own study. And I've also got thousands of hours worth of experience with clients. And biocoding has really come about by me being able to externalize and teach what I naturally and intuitively do with clients. So when a client was with me, I would be observing and watching them, hearing them talk. They'd be talking to me. And as they're talking, their body will, and I think, why is their shoulder twitching? What's their foot saying there? Oh, look, their foot's disagreeing with what they're saying. So I'm tracking what the client is saying with their words, but I'm also tracking the conversation with the body is having as well. And what you'd find is like the client would be saying something and the body would be going, no.
So you're writing all this down at the same time, or you're just...
I would make notes afterwards. I'd make all these just absent-minded notes where I would say the clients twirled their hand like this, and then their hand paused for a bit. Then an insight landed and they stopped, and then boom. And I would just put the note to one side. Later, I started to catalogue a lot of my notes and realize there's actually a pattern. And there's a pattern across clients of how the body speaks, to the point where you can read the body like it's speaking in sentences. So if you think of one movement as a word, and then a sequence of movements like a sentence, and then what would happen is the body would say that sentence a few times until it feels complete, I think is a good word. And it would punctuate that sentence with a full stop, which was usually a yawn or a sigh. And then the client would relax. Now, that was really interesting. And I figured out a way to do this deliberately with clients, to trigger them into a state by providing the right environment and opportunity where you could get the client to just sit back a bit and allow the body to come forward and have its conversation. And these conversations turned out to be so reparative. And after sessions, clients would tell me, oh, I've come off that medication. I didn't need it anymore. The pain's gone. Or they would say, I slept really well that night. Or my libido came back. Or I suddenly said no to someone. I've never said no to someone in my life. And yeah, it was really fascinating. There's still a lot to learn. And I'm being taught every day by my own body and by clients' bodies. I'm still learning. I don't think I'll ever stop learning. I think it will be till the day I die, and then I'm going to learn something else.
Definitely. So do you do this in person and remotely?
Yeah, a lot of it I do remotely.
Okay.
Because I have some clients that are abroad, and the program that I look at it combines a holistic view of the person. So it's not just like, oh, here's this one treatment fix. I'm looking at the roots of the tree and what environment does this tree need to be in? What soil does this need to have? How much light, how much water? And we're looking at the client as an individual, trying to help them to find a structure within their week, because I found the best way to help a nervous system feel safe is to let it know what's coming next. So things like making sure you get up at the same time every day, eating at regular times, eating foods that are easy to digest and nutritious, making sure you are hydrated, so water plus electrolytes so the body can signal effectively, and just implementing more lifestyle medicine protocols to give the body what it needs to manage the load versus the resource. And then we look at things like limiting beliefs and any kind of blocks that might get in the way of recovery, alongside the movement practice with the biocoding therapy itself, where we get the body talking.
So this ties into nervous system regulation?
Yeah.
And okay, because that's become a popular phrase, because my son is autistic, and I've heard his therapist use that a lot, and his doctors use that a lot. His nervous system, he needs, he's not being regulated, or he needs to regulate. That I'm hearing that a lot.
What do
So
you understand about the term co-regulation?
code regulation,
Co-regulation, because it's actually
co
really important with autism.
really.
Hmm.
I've never heard co-regulation before.
Okay, so co-regulation is fundamental to anyone's recovery. And once you understand about co-regulation, you understand a lot more about your own interactions, not just with your son who's autistic, but also with just general people around you. So have you ever walked into like a yoga class or a meditation class or to see a therapist or something, and as soon as you walk in the room, you go, I feel really calm around this person?
No, I
Have you
can't
ever?
say that I have.
No, I'm so sorry.
I've never met anybody like that. I would love to because I'll be around them all the time.
Wouldn't you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you ever been in a room where you walked in and you just thought, oh God, this person is making me feel stressed, and they're not doing
all the
anything?
time, all the time,
Okay.
all the time. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So
Holly,
without,
I don't really like people to be around people. it's
I know
it's
it.
it's just I'm working on it. I'm working on
So
it. You know.
so I'm gonna teach you something that I teach my clients about co-regulation. So when we meet someone who, if we do meet someone who we walk in and, oh, I just feel really calm. This person's making me feel like everything's okay. What's happening in that instance is they have a robust nervous system and they have usually a high heart rate variability. And that high heart rate variability is an indicator of their positive resilience in dealing with stress, right? So they are able to manage stress effectively. Having a low heart rate variability means that you're not managing stress very well. So because they're quite strong in their own sense of their own nervous system, you can be anxious, but it doesn't make them anxious because their nervous system is dominant, let's say. So I'm calm and I'm saying everything's okay. Everything's okay. And that person can relax around me because they're like, she's got this. So what they're responding to is not my words, they're responding to my own heart. And there was an interesting study by the Heart Math Institute that demonstrated this, where they found that one person's heart could influence another person's heart without anyone saying a word, and you can influence people's heart rate variability. So if you can learn stress tolerance, so a gradual exposure to stresses where you are able to tolerate it and approach it with a sense of curiosity and like, yeah, this feels uncomfortable, but I'm actually okay. Over time, you start building a sense of resilience to stress. And so you're less reactive. So when something happens, like, I don't know, you're stuck in traffic, you're not like immediately, oh my God, you're like, this is annoying, right? And then
Hmm.
what happens is then you set the tone for the people around you. You become the yoga teacher, the therapist, the meditation coach, right? You
Hmm.
become that. I want you to think about it this way. This is even easier, right? Let's say you foster a dog that has been very neglected and abused, right? And you bring them home and they're just hiding in the corner in the bathroom. What do you do with that dog?
I try to comfort that dog. I try to give him his space a little bit.
Yes, good. Give them their
Yeah,
space.
yeah.
Yep.
Bring treats and let
Yeah.
just observe him and let him come to me after a while.
Yes, that's right. So what you do is you stay calm. You don't take their behavior personally. Oh, they don't love me. You sit in the corner, in the opposite corner. There's a treat on the floor next to you. You're not looking at them. You're in your mind, you're saying, we're good. I'm okay. You're okay. Maybe you do that 20 times throughout the week. And eventually,
Right.
the dog comes creeping over and it takes the treat and runs off, right? Eventually, if you keep maintaining that approach with that dog, what would happen to the dog?
He'll start to trust me.
Yeah, and then start to co-regulate with you.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, so you're modeling regulation to the dog. And the
Hmm.
same with your son. What you want to do is model regulation. So you want in your mind to say, we're all good. Like he can be having a tantrum. That's okay. Sometimes we get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
We get frustrated. But your tantrum is yours and I'm here. And we're all good. I'll be here. I'm waiting here with my
Right,
treat.
right, right,
I'm sitting
right.
here with my treat. I'll let you come to me.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. That just really calmed me and it's like patience, just have patience. And because what I do, I try
Yes.
to just, I do sit there and wait for him to calm down, and I tell him it's okay. And I try to observe, and I'm trying to figure out what's setting him off, what's his triggers and everything like that. And I can't for the life of me figure out, all his triggers. I know some of his triggers, but sometimes he'll just melt down.
Yep.
He'll be
So
sitting there and just flip out.
in some ways, when you're doing that, so when you're trying to figure out what's wrong, what's happening inside you while you're trying to figure that out?
It's like anxiety almost and worry.
Yes. And then if you can't figure it out, then what?
If I can't figure it out, I kind of get sad.
Yeah, or frustrated.
Right.
So
Mostly
then what's
sadness, though. I mostly get sad because I feel like I can't help.
Yeah, it's sad. It feels
Right.
sad, but there'll be some frustration there as well. So
Right.
then that's the tone that you're setting.
So it's like energy. He could feel my energy.
Yeah, like imagine that's the tone of the room.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's going to be reflecting and modeling how you are, but you have to be the model. So if you, in some ways, if you let go of the idea of what caused the trigger, like what was it, and just accept where you are, oh, here we are.
Right.
There's no, to be honest, when you're in the thick of something like that, there's no point in trying to figure things out anyway. It's really just, it's just about stability, providing stability.
Right.
And so if you let go of the idea of figuring out what caused it and just say, oh, here we are, and I'm here, I'm just going to sit here. I'm not leaving you. Like, we're good. We get frustrated sometimes.
Right.
I tell you, I'm training my puppy to be a therapy dog for my clients. And one of the main parts of her training is learning how to be calm. And some of my clients come in, they're upset or they're anxious or they're sick. And she has to stay completely calm, regardless of what any of the clients are doing. And so the majority of the training with her, it wasn't like, oh, pour and, beg. And it wasn't anything like that. It was about regulating the nervous system for herself so that her nervous system is strong enough where she's not bothered by other people's mental state.
Right. Yes.
And so when she would get frustrated, as small puppies do, I allowed her to be frustrated. I didn't tell her no, or don't do this, or don't do that. I just waited. And I would just wait until she figured out what it was I was looking for. And then I would instantly reward her.
Yes.
So once she figured it out herself, I would let her get through the frustration. I would let her figure it out and then immediately reward her for doing that. And now, consequently, I can take her anywhere. Anyone can be like anything. And she is just calm.
Can I ship you my golden doodle and and can we just get that out of the way right now? Like express something, because you're amazing. And one thing I found interesting, you say the body often communicates before the conscious mind understands. Give us a real example.
Can you say the first part of the question again? Because
you say the body often communicates before the conscious mind understands.
Yes.
Like give us a real example of it.
I'll give you one of my own. I went for some hypnotherapy recently for myself, and while I was laying down, the therapist had asked me a question, and it was something to do with like receiving positive affirmations or something like that. And I said, oh, I don't know. Like, I knew where to put negative things. I knew how to internalize negativity, and I didn't know how to internalize positivity towards myself. And I said, I really have nowhere to put that. Did you see that?
Yeah. You're I don't want to keep you forever. I could talk to you forever.
No,
Here goes
but did you
my
see
buddy
that?
right
Where
here.
the body, like, that's what I did. Oh, bless him. But did you see what I did? Now, I said, I really have nowhere to put that. And the therapist is a very good therapist. So he said, did you see where your body gestured? And I went, there. My body knew exactly where to put that. There was a space there. It just, it was, like a file that probably, hadn't been properly installed. It was there though. And so then we could go into that space and work out, how the body would internalize that. in
Mm-hmm.
that space. It was really interesting. And I've seen this countless times with my own clients, where the body will, like when you're searching for something, what is it, that thing? Oh yeah, it's that. And I always think this one is a really funny one because we do this intuitively, right? And I always think it looks like an antenna trying to find signal. Where is it? Where is it? It's there.
Wow.
And then we know
Yeah.
what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh man, Holly, I want to have you on here forever. I know you got other things to do, but while we
That's okay.
winding down, I want to challenge your work a little. Some people will they will hear biocoding and immediately say, there's no evidence, that's pseudoscience or whatever. This is
Yep.
just another wellness trend. How do you respond to that?
I think that's okay for them to say that. It is a novel therapy and it's a practitioner developed therapy. And I'm the practitioner, and I've developed this therapy through lived experience and phenomenology. And because it's a novel therapy, which means new, that means it hasn't gone through things like research studies and testing. And that's how therapies begin. So when you look at things like somatic experiencing, Feldenkrais, EMDR, they all began exactly the same way. And so if those therapists were put off by the idea that they hadn't yet got the credibility, we wouldn't have those wonderful therapies. And so I'm happy for people to feel that way about it. What I would say is that when I make observations, I'm immediately checking them against what does the existing science say on this matter. And sometimes there isn't anything anyone has said, which is why it's a novel therapy. But often it aligns with existing research and expands upon it. What I haven't found yet is anything that contradicts existing science. So I haven't found, like, if I've come up with an observation and then it said, well, this science says otherwise. I haven't found anything yet. But that's something that I continually check. One thing I would say is, if you want to climb Everest, hire a guide that has already climbed Everest.
Yes.
You can have therapists who have spent a tremendous amount of time researching and learning existing modalities, and it's all theory in their mind. And where my experience is coming from is lived experience. I've climbed Everest. I've worked out, which are the best ways and methods to do that. I've experimented on myself. I have, observed thousands of other climbers that I've taken up there. And I just have to keep going with that. I'm going to keep learning that, there's going to be things, if you have the same conversation with me in a year's time, I'm going to say, I didn't know that then. I'm really
Yeah.
excited that I've learned that
Yeah.
now.
Right. I'll tell you what, I've been to your website. I love your website. I'm gonna book my consultation, soon as I get off of here with you, and I look forward to that. I've learned a lot from you today, but I have one more question, final question, I promise.
Go on.
Everything we've talked about today, the cult, the homelessness, the trauma, the chronic pain, the rebuilding. If one person watching this is on the verge of giving up, what's the one thing you want them to remember?
If I could say anything to that person who is on the verge of giving up, it would be, you are capable of so much more than you realize. And it's only when you are really thrown into the fire that you realize what you are made of. And, we talk about having huge amounts of pressure, and it's pressure that creates a diamond.
Yes, I love that. And one of my favorite things you said earlier was losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. Most people don't understand that, won't understand that until they survived it, So thank you for reminding people that sometimes the end of one life is just, the beginning of another,
Yeah. I'll tell you what
And
my son says. So my son, when we were going through this time, it started when he was 9 years old. He's nearly 13 now. And when he was going through this time, he really identified with the mythical creature of the phoenix. And he has a little phoenix necklace, and he was really,
interesting.
really identified with it. And the reason is because the phoenix, when it reaches the end of its cycle, burns itself to ashes so that the new phoenix can rise from the ashes.
I love
And
that.
that's his symbol. for how he's internalized the experience. And I think that's a very beautiful one.
That's interesting. I'm part of a group, actually a large group here in San Diego called the Phoenix.
Yeah.
And it's all about healing. They throw like healing events, runs, and barbecues and everything like that. You know,
Lovely.
yeah, I love it. So that's very interesting. And Holly, this has been one of the most fascinating conversations we've had on war. You know, whether someone agrees with every idea discussed today or not, I hope they leave asking better questions about themselves and, you know, their bodies and what recovery really means. You know, please tell everyone where they can learn more about biocoding, your work, and everything you're building.
So you can go to www.hollyannavellichor.com, and I'm also on Substack. You can find, there's not that many Hollyanna Vellichors if you look it up.
Right.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as well, but I publish some articles and things on Substack.
Okay, cool. And I'll have it in the description, guys. Look down in the description, find her links and everything. And I encourage people to really, you know, do what I'm doing. Book a consultation. Holly, thank you for being here.
Or just ask a question. You know, be curious.